What's up everyone, I'm Coach Leo, and in this video I'm going to be making a no BS tier list on things that are stopping you from climbing. This is going to be based on my own experience as an ex-pro and challenger jungler, but also the knowledge that I have acquired from spending the past year coaching players ranging from unranked to challenger. And so jumping straight into it, first up we have not playing enough. So this one is a classic, guys. Like anything, if you want to be good at something, you need to put practice into it and you need to practice and hone your craft. The person who practices their craft more will always come out ahead of you. So this year I experienced this many times coaching, players coming to me saying, I don't know what's wrong, I think I need to do this, that, whatever. And then, we take a look at their OPGG and they've played 16 games of ranked in the past 3 months, right? Now, don't get me wrong, I understand for this, for many, that this is a hobby and we have jobs, we have limited time, etc. However, if your goal is to climb, before you start thinking, it's your champion pool or your fundamentals aren't good enough, and you spend more time on, YouTube researching, watching Twitch streams, debating on Reddit, whatever it is, just, even if you're just feeling lost, you need to just queue up and play. The point is to have a big enough sample size to then diagnose on the next best course of action. So, okay, this champion maybe is not working, or maybe we keep messing up in the early game. Okay, maybe a common trend is that we keep losing skirmishing, right? We can figure out what it is, but we need that sample size first. And additionally, I'm completely aware, coaching this year, that ranked anxiety exists. Some players care about, what it will look like if you get placed, and what your friends will see if you get placed in silver or something. I don't know, right? But we all started somewhere, you have to realize. And usually the hardest part is just taking the first leap to keep queuing up. So yeah, this one's really, really important. It's going to be placed into the A tier. And the main reason for this is just because, there is a balance, right? Obviously playing as much as you can is good, but it would be S tier if you could play literally infinitely, right? If it was that good, it would be an S tier. So a good balance is still needed at some point, but playing as much as you can is super important. Okay, moving on to tilt and losing streaks. So naturally, when we want to win and climb, we will emotionally invest ourselves, right? And when we don't get the outcome that we want, we become much more likely to make irrational, uncharacteristic decisions in game that's going to lead to mistakes and further tilting into massive loss streaks, etc. Right? We've all dealt with this before. And then, you have to think about the 4 other teammates that we have to deal with in solo queue. Things can become quite frustrating. And the main thing that we actually want to combat is not necessarily the frustration in terms of our teammates. That's unfortunately what you signed up for when you play League of Legends. But it's to stop ourselves from spiraling those 3 unlucky games, where every lane, went 0 and 10, into a 10-game loss streak. Remember that, 5 of those next 10 games you lost, you probably would have won if you were in an emotionally neutral state. The way that I kind of like to put it is 15 games out of 100, you will lose 100%. 15, you will win 100%. And then it's kind of the idea is it's your job to make sure that you play your best in these 70 other games unaffected by those instant losses. And so how can we kind of combat feeling frustrated, tilting, and going in loss streaks? Well, it's important to understand that everyone is different. So you need to know yourself. If you have to, tell yourself, I'm not tilted, there's a pretty good chance that you probably are. Things that have worked for me and others are just recognizing when you have those free wins. It can kind of make those free losses sting a little bit less. Taking breaks. If for me, for example, if I lose 3 games in a row, I'll either just take a break or I'll hop on a Smurf that's, similar MMR, where I don't really have any emotional investment. So yeah, it's really important that you know yourself. From my experience coaching this year, this kind of thing costs so much LP, unnecessary LP loss. This is an easy S tier on the tier list that keeps you from climbing. Next up, we have being short-sighted with your ranked goal. Now, this is definitely something I learned this year from coaching. Every session with a new player, I would ask, what's your rank goal? And too often I would hear short-term goals such as I want to hit, X tier in the next 2 weeks, or X rank in the next 2 weeks. I want to hit X rank before the season ends, which is like in 1 month. And the problem with having such short-sighted ranked goals is that because you have created this deadline and you've put this unnecessary pressure on yourself, every decision that you make in game is going to hold so much more weight than what it really should. Again, this is going to lead to uncharacteristic mistakes. And this can be a very vicious cycle. So it's very important that you are able to just brush off games, right? The free losses, just brush them off. Because in the grand scheme of things, that one game or that one bad week, or, going backwards for a day or two is not really going to matter in the grand scheme of things. And now the correct approach to rank goals is always long-term. And this is something I always go through with the players that I coach. I recommend to set a realistic rank goal for 3 to 6 months of, passionate, hard work. You're giving it your all. Climbing is not linear, so there will be ups and downs, and we should expect for that and account for that and give ourselves as much time as needed, right? Not too long, but not too short. A healthy approach to short-term goals is just tracking areas of your game that you want to improve on. I want to have 80 CS at 10 minutes because my CSing sucks, or I want to be able to clear before the scuttle spawns, right? Whatever it is, these short-term goals week by week work a lot better to improve your gameplay. So short-sighted rank goals are, they're a little bit less common. I don't think many players climbing solo queue, but it's kind of subconscious. People subconsciously think about it. And for that reason, this is going to be B tier. All right, so up next, we have wasting energy on your teammates. Now, where do I even begin? As we've already established, solo queue is frustrating largely due to having 4 other variables that are completely out of our control. Now, out of our control is the key here because they literally change every single game, your teammates. So putting energy towards them is going to have very diminishing returns. This is largely kind of known in high elo. That's why, for the most part, high elo games are just pings. No one's typing. There are obviously flaming here and there. But coaching this year, it's very apparent that a lot of players actually like to feel some level of camaraderie and teamwork and things like that, which I can understand. Not all of us are trying to go pro or whatever. You just need to be doing it in the right way. So never invest more than the return is basically what we're going to be explaining here. Meaning, the thing is, you could win 2 games because you were the captain of the ship. You were investing all your energy, typing to everyone, what they should do, how we should play, what objectives, all these things, right? We're being, a leader in the game. However, the problem with this is that in the other 8 games we do that, we had Disco Nunu and, we had Sona Top, and all of that investment in those 10 games, it just taxed yourself and your own mental more than what you got in return. And so, the best and only investment that you can make is to yourself, as you're the only consistent variable in every single one of your games. Put all of that energy towards yourself, improve yourself, and always focus on what you can do better. So how do we invest in ourselves while also having these 4 other variables, our teammates, every single game? And the biggest kind of way we're going to do that is either by just /mute all, or a combination of /mute all and /mute pings all. Now, depending on your tolerance, how tilted you're feeling that day, or kind of like, what kind of temptations there are, you can choose to mute people individually, right? When you see something, you can mute them. That's completely fine. The main point is that we don't want to be influenced by our team, so that we can be responsible and accountable for our decisions, leading to our own self-improvement. So if my top lane is spam pinging me, hey, come gank this, and I go and gank it, I can easily just blame that now and say, oh, I wasn't going to gank that, right? But when you mute that, and you still gank that then becomes your, you can take accountability for that, and then you can improve from it. So remember that your teammates are the rank that you're actually trying to climb out of, right? So by muting them, you actually remove a lot of the temptation to interact, to argue, and also just the fear of being blamed, right? A lot of times when I coach players, they're like, oh, I thought he was going to flame me. right? That's why I did this. And you just want to remove that completely. You want to remove all of that kind of thing completely. And finally, yeah, we can still communicate, right, with our team. And this is going to be through the use of the ping wheel. Now, you may mute all and you may not hear anyone's pings. I know it's a bit narcissistic of us. And the ping wheel is actually extremely effective, and it has basically little investment and risk to it, right? You don't risk getting into an argument. You just simply mute people that are pinging you too much and things like that. So yeah, wasting energy on teammates is probably one of, if not the most common things I experienced when coaching players this year. And due to it being so heavily weighted in your improvement, this is easily an S tier thing for something that's going to stop you from climbing. Easily S tier. Alrighty, next up, we have having a fixed mindset. Now, this one definitely ties in with wasting energy on teammates, but you know, specifically blaming them as for the reason that you aren't or can't climb, right? Because of this fixed mindset, you know, we're unable to look at ourselves as the root cause that stops us from climbing. And there is plenty online that you can kind of search about fixed versus growth mindset. Typically, when we have a fixed mindset, we become, you know, delusional. We deflect or avoid facts that point to us. Or, you know, maybe we just believe that we won't improve even if we try. And this is basically just because, you know, our ego is protecting us from the danger of I'm not good enough, or, you know, what if I fail? Now, in order to climb, what we want to have is a growth mindset. This means, you know, we embrace losing. We aren't afraid to you know, face our mistakes or even make mistakes. And this ultimately creates a healthy ego. I do want to place this one in S tier, honestly. However, I think there are kind of a lot of examples of players who don't really have the healthiest of egos that are still able to climb. So for that reason, we're going to place, you know, having a fixed mindset in A tier. But, you know, this one's, you know, leave a comment below what do you think about this one. But yeah, A tier. Excessive VOD review. So, you know, now what tends to happen now that we have a healthy ego, you know, and we're looking within ourselves to improve, we start VOD reviewing. And for many players who want to improve, we VOD review so much that it starts to kind of, you know, this is something I had as a pro player as well, trying to improve. It kind of starts to feel like a chore. We're just doing it for the sake of, you know, if I do this, I'm improving. And although I do believe reviewing your VODs can never really be harmful, right? A better approach in terms of how you want to use your time is to specifically look for areas in your gameplay that you want to improve and kind of only review that part. You know, so for example, oh, you know, I want to get better at, you know, ganking. Okay, let's just see how we played a bunch of ganks in the early game, right? Or I want to get better at trading in lane. Okay, let's just focus on trading, right? And this also goes in with those short-term gameplay kind of things. This is where that comes in. This way as well, you don't really overwhelm yourself just with an entire game's VOD and you kind of just zone out. So for this reason, you know, it's definitely not harmful, but you could just be kind of wasting time doing it excessively. So for this reason, it's going into C tier, you know, not too crazy if you're doing this. Up next, we have smurfing / making new accounts. This is another big thing that I learned this year coaching. Too many times students come to me, you know, I ask for their OPGD. They say, which one do you want? You know, they have 7 accounts, saying, you know, this next account, you know, I have a 70% win rate. This is the one that's going to make me reach my peak. And this is just not really the way that you want to go about it, right? If you're someone who does play a lot, having 2 accounts is fine. Okay. Having 2 accounts for the sake of, you know, the stuff that we talked about, stopping loss streaks and stuff like that is great. But you have to realize that playing at your own elo is really, really important to actually build habits and verse better players. You know, this is the example I always give. If I got put in bronze MMR for 1,000 games, I would build so many bad habits and I would lose so many good habits. And this is all about habits, right? You don't want to verse worse opponents because it's just going to make you worse. You want to verse, you want to embrace, verse those players at your own skill level and grind through it slowly. Don't cope and say, you know, this next account is where it's gonna happen. And so for this reason, this is B tier. You don't see this too much. You know, a lot of players who play the game a lot do this. B tier, not too bad, but also not great. Up next, we have the killer, playing too many champions. Again, this is another thing from coaching. Obviously, I knew this already. You know, champion mastery is absolutely vital. You know, if you try and become good at 10 champions, you know, and you only have 10 skill points, you're going to be 1 out of 10 on all those champions. Really, what you want to be is 10 out of 10 on one champion. So the fewer champions that you play, the better. You know, 1 or 2 is obviously going to be the most ideal for climbing in solo queue. Now, when it comes to, you know, what I've realized as well this year, is that, you know, a lot of players get bored. You know, I myself get bored as well, and it's okay to kind of explore champions sometimes and kind of find out what you like, right? But make sure you explore, you figure out what you like, you choose some champions, and then you kind of follow those champions through, you know, a journey. You know, you play 50 games of them, you research about them, you look up builds, you look up what their identities are, you watch some educational content. At least give yourself that time to play those champions and then say, okay, well, let's do some exploring again. That's completely fine. But, you know, when players come to me, they're OPGG, I read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 champions, and then I ask them, hey, what's going on here? And they just say, oh, I'm just kind of bored. You need to have some kind of discipline as well, right? Another thing I really suggest with this, if you are someone who can play a lot, again, the 2 accounts come in. Have your main account to be the account that you really are only playing your 2 best champions on, or 1 best champion on, and then save that other account to do that exploring. This is super important. This is easily an A tier. It is close to S tier, but we got some big hitters in the S tier, so it kind of has to drop for that reason. And obviously playing a bunch of different champions is not terrible. It is pretty bad to stop you from climbing, but at least you're kind of learning the game, which is good, right? And up next, we have being a meta slave. Now, this one kind of, again, ties in with, you know, having too many champions. Being, you know, following a meta and, you know, going on Lolalytics and researching what are the win rates for champions in the current meta. Now, you don't need to be switching champions every single patch. You know, players that I coach always asking me, hey, what's the secret sauce, right? What's the secret sauce right now? You don't need to be switching every patch. Now, you do need to think, well, what's really strong right now, right? That's only going to help you, just because, you know, statistically, you know, the stats don't really lie. So it is important that you are actually a meta slave. However, you don't want to be switching too much. But yes, being knowledgeable, researching, doing these things is pretty important. So for that reason, being a meta slave is going into the D tier for things that will stop you from climbing. Next up, we have the overconsumption of educational content. Again, all these kind of things are coming from me coaching, you know, over 200 players this year alone. And, you know, the problem with overconsumption of educational content is obviously there is a lot of really good content out here, but, you know, people have conflicting opinions. If you get too in deep in, you know, all of these different ideas, it's just going to confuse you. So of course, consuming educational content is great. You just don't want to get too lost. You want to make sure that you kind of figure some things out on your own. Just take bits from here and there and kind of make sense of them. But don't try and, you know, take everything so kind of, you know, heavy weighted. Just take what you can. So for overconsumption of educational content, of course, it's pretty good. So it's going into this C tier. Moving on to being overly rigid or, you know, kind of tunnel visioned. Now, this is another thing I definitely would have had kind of no idea about that stops players from climbing. But this kind of ties in with the consumption of educational content as well. You know, we consume all of this knowledge and things like that, and then, you know, we put it into action, right? And, you know, I'm like the fundamentals guy, right? I have these, you know, things that I talk about, and, you know, you should do this and that and tempo. But what kind of happens, and what I've experienced coaching, is that people stick so rigidly to these things that they're not actually experiencing the game. they're afraid to go for that 1v1. If you think that you can win a 1v1, it's kind of important that you try, because what trying does is it kind of builds that knowledge. It builds, a library of plays. Oh, I can take that 1v1 the next time. And so this is overall just very, very important. I'm not saying, go for this 10% play. I'm just saying if you feel like you can do something, go for it. Don't be afraid. Don't have tunnel vision. Don't think because you do that, you're not doing the fundamentals or whatever it is anymore. We also need to build that game library, that game knowledge. And so for this reason, we're putting this into the B tier. All right, moving on to autopiloting and / not being fully locked in. This one's pretty self-explanatory. You need to be focused. You need to be locked in. You need to remove distractions. You need to not be, screen sharing to your friends. You need to not have, real life distractions. You got to lock in, because in League of Legends, there is a lot of things going on, and your mental stack is already kind of being used. If you're talking with someone, if you're, whatever it is, if any of your attention is being taken away, you're not giving yourself the best chance to make the best plays in that game. So yeah, pretty self-explanatory. I don't really need to talk much about it. This is definitely an A tier. The only reason why it's not an S tier is simply because, again, there are very, very good players. Not so much that they get distracted, right? But there are very, very good players that their autopilot is at such a high level, which is also a very important skill to kind of, because, when you're playing a lot of League, you are going to be autopiloting sometimes. You're going to have 100% uptime. So building your autopilot to a high level, which is basically just becoming better at the game. You don't practice autopiloting to get better at autopiloting. That's why it's not S tier, and that's why it's in the A tier for stopping you from climbing. And next up on this tier list, we have investing in a mentor / program. Now, obviously, in today's world, everyone's going to be trying to sell you on something, myself included. But it's not all bad. It's not all, red flags go up, whatever. There are some really, really good resources out there, aka Jungle Academy. But you just have to make sure that what you're investing in, you need to put the research in. You need to see, what are the results of this thing. Obviously people, again, are going to be trying to sell you on something. But if they actually have the credibility, if they actually are about what they're saying, you actually can save a lot of time, especially if you are someone who wants to improve. Because having a mentor, having resources that just literally answer your questions and your gameplay and whatever it is just too good to pass up. Like when I was playing at the start, there was nothing like this that existed. So yeah, it's definitely not something that's going to stop you from climbing unless you choose the wrong thing and you invest poorly. So for that reason, we're going to be putting investing in a mentor or a program into the D tier. All right. Playing in a good condition, physically, mentally. This is something that I used to, value very, very, very highly. I think over the years, I've kind of realized that, playing more kind of, prioritizes itself in terms of results over making sure you're in the most peak condition you possibly can. Obviously, you want to be, at a level where you're not falling asleep. You want to be feeling good, of course, but sometimes people take this to, too much of an extreme. We don't need to be, having cold showers and doing this and doing that and whatever it is. You don't need to be doing that. Just play more. This is something, just don't worry too much about it. Don't worry if you're, feeling a little bit hungry. Just play. Playing will always be better, obviously, unless you are falling asleep at the steering wheel. And so for that reason, playing in a good condition is going to be C tier. And last but not least, we have your gear, your gaming gear, your hardware, whatever that may be. I have had a few coaching sessions this year, where some players are playing on, these huge monitors, these huge widescreen curved TVs and things like that. And I'm wondering, can you see your mini map? Because it's seeming as an issue that, your awareness is lacking. So, you know, your setup and your gear is, it would be something that I would suggest investing in. Obviously, there are challenger players who probably play on like a laptop. Most important thing is that your ping is good, that your monitor, I recommend, you know, at least 144 hertz refresh rate. Make sure it's not too large either. Don't play on like a TV or something. And then just have, you know, have comfortable peripherals and whatever else. That doesn't really matter. And so for that reason, your gear, your hardware is going into the C tier for things stopping you from climbing. And so this is my tier list, my final tier list for things that will stop you from climbing. If you like this kind of video, leave a like. If you disagree with any of the tiers where I've put things, let me know in the comments below. Hopefully you guys find this useful in some way. And I hope to see you guys all in the next one.